Hi everybody, Nindegalathiel here, and today's read is a Korean manhwa webtoon called The Remarried Empress. Now let me start this one with a statement that might make some of you already click away. I did not finish reading it. And honestly, I feel like this is one that no one will ever finish at all. I mean, it already has over 250 chapters and is still going. At first I quite enjoyed the story. It wasn't my first time reading a dramatical fantasy historical romance, and I was led to start reading it by a certain aspect of the internet culture. Before I explain that aspect, let me explain to you the overall story without spoilers. Spoilers will come later. A little disclaimer beforehand. Manhwa like this are originally written in Korean. As a result, sometimes translations can make mistakes on names. I do my best. Let's get into it. The story, without spoilers. The story starts with us getting introduced to our Empress Ninde, who got engaged to the Emperor-to-be Sovishu while they were both still children. Luckily for them, they grew up actually loving one another. Empress Ninde ended up being generally seen and respected as a perfect empress. Her happy life, however, ends when Emperor Sovishu demands a divorce so he can marry his mistress Rashta. During the build-up to this divorce, when Sovishu takes in his mistress Rashta from God knows who knows where, Ninde starts to get secret correspondence from a mysterious friend brought to her by means of an exotic-looking golden bird. A lot of stuff happens that I will not go into detail about now, but her mystery friend turns out to be the prince of another kingdom who can turn into the bird that has been visiting her, and they develop a romance. So once Sovishu demands this divorce, Ninde accepts and demands to be allowed to get remarried. Something unheard of, but not impossible. Ninde gets married to her new romantic partner, Henry. And that's where you think they live happily ever after and I just spoiled the whole story. Well, you'd be wrong. What I just told you is only the surface. There's a lot of political battles, scheming behind the scenes, and a lot more things that Ninde and Henry have to face even after they get married. After a while, it started to feel like the author just was trying to find anything to keep the story from ending. Twists after twist, plots after plot, and honestly, after a while, I even had to try hard to keep liking Ninde. Now, how did I come up on this story? The way I landed on reading this story is due to the manhwa webtoon community using the term trashta while commenting on stories as a means to refer to a romance rival character who will be basically like cry bullies. They'll do something bad towards the main character to provoke a reaction and then cry to the romantic interest about said reaction. I did some asking and reading to find out that this term comes from people calling Rashta in this story trash, and then it evolved into trashta, and it became sort of a cultural term within the communities. Now I was intrigued and started reading this story. Earlier chapters I agreed that Rashta was indeed trash. I mean, her very first meeting with Ninde, she broke several social codes, even ripped the Empress's dress, and then after Navia's mate scolded her for it, she played the victim towards Sovishu, who passed by and very severely reacted in her favor. The more I read about the ways Rashta wrapped Sovishu around her fingers, the more I was calling her trashta as well, and rooting for her to get a bad ending. I even willingly ignored the information that she had grown up as a slave due to the crimes of her parents, whatever crimes those were. About Rashta. Warning, from this point on there will be spoilers, specifically about the character Rashta. If you wish to avoid these spoilers, please skip to the timestamp that is showing on the screen right now. I will give those who listen without watching a bit of extra time to click where they have to go. Alright, ready? Let's keep going then. Rashta is both a complex and an oversimplified character in one. She puts on this flowery personality that is a stark contrast with Navier's seriousness. She acts like a complete airhead in order to worm her way into people's sympathy, but at the same time she was cunning enough to figure out how to put herself just where Sovishu would be during his annual hunting trip, and how to act like the poor, undeserving slave runaway that would pull at his heartstrings. She gives the impression of being aloof, while behind the scenes she's pulling strings and plotting ways to make everything go in her favor. As the reader, we get more of that impression of her by showing things like her secretly grinning and smirking while Sovishu gets mad at Navier, all clearly to make sure that we, as the reader, will hate her character. Honestly, that was done quite well. I don't easily let my opinion on a character get swayed. No, that's a lie. I've had my opinions on characters sway like a pendulum because I get overly immersed while reading. Now, when you start to read things from Sovishu's and Rashta's perspective, the reason why the divorce happened against Navier despite her doing nothing wrong is because Rashta is pregnant. Sovishu is convinced that Navier is infertile due to abortion-poisoned cookies they ate by mistake as children, which is why Navier hasn't born him an heir yet. Sovishu plans to divorce Navier but make her stay, and he would marry Rashta for 1 year. In that 1 year, his firstborn child with her would be officially registered as the royal heir, and then he'd revert it all to get Navier back as his empress. Despite what he says and does, he claims he still loves Navier, though he failed for years to show that, which has made Navier long give up on getting his love back, bringing in the mistress being the last straw, which is what led to her developing her new romance. Anyway, back to Rashta. She tries to win Sovishu's heart by dressing and behaving more and more like Navier, and even going as far as imitating her mannerisms and the way she speaks, though it doesn't land as well as when Navier does it, which frustrates her. One day, Rashta gets recognized by the man who used to own her as a slave, and he decides to blackmail her. Rashta already had a child before this while she was a slave, one she born from a twisted form of affection that she had grown with the previous owner's son. Said child is still with this owner who had made Rashta falsely believe her child had been stillborn. Meanwhile, a friend of Henry decides to mess around with Rashta as well, while pretending to be her ally. He gives her advice that has both true statements and misleading ones to nudge her to self-ruin. He's not doing this out of any obligations towards his friend Henry or Navier. No, he has his own motives related to how the imperial family has caused his mother great harm when he was a child. Yeah, this story gets more and more messed up as you keep reading. Rashta tries multiple underhanded ways to deal with her former master and with Navier, but it all fails. At some point she starts involving Henry as well, though she fails to pay him. Eventually, Navier leaves to get married with Henry. In other words, it seems like finally everything is going just as Rashta wants? Well, you'd be wrong. Rashta is unable to get the love from Sovishu she wants. He only feels an obligation to her due to the baby, and at the start he just felt some interest and lust, but never love. Seriously, this man, he had such a perfect wife. The moment Navier leaves to go live with her new husband Henry, who by this time has become king of his nation, Rashta tries to fill in her shoes, though Sovishu doesn't really let her. He's only interested in the baby, and basically made her empress in name only. Rashta's child ends up born premature, however still properly developed, which causes some questions among those involved, but no one presses for it. I am mentioning it because it will be important later. Rashta blows money on the blackmail, gets put on a stricter budget, but ends up finding some charity funds that Navye had left behind and uses those for her own purposes. She turns cruel to the servants, even cuts out a maid's tongue to save her own secrets. She starts to spiral, is even unable to hold her baby without flashbacks of her previous child, even causing her to throw her current child to the ground one day. Luckily, the child remained unharmed, just mainly shaken up. After that, Sovashu decides he'll be the sole caretaker of the baby. After a lot more drama and Sovashu suddenly hearing the news that Navye not only got pregnant, but gave birth to healthy twins, Sovashu starts to wonder if he is the infertile one, which makes him wonder if his child with Rashta is even his. Remember, the child was born premature, though still properly developed? Yeah, this is where that plot point comes in place. Sovashu had long known who Rashta's old master was. He knew about the previous child. He even knew that the old master was blackmailing her. The main reason he didn't do anything, though, is because he wanted to test Rashta and hope she will come clean and honest on her own. You guessed it, she never did. Lie after lie pile up, and Sovashu starts to resent her, even though he is the main reason for his own resentment, as her behavior is clearly in response to his half-hearted commitment and actions towards her. After testing Rashta and her honesty, he decides to eventually do a paternity test. This paternity test not only turns into a public spectacle, proving that the child is not Sovashu's, but the fake friend guy shows up with Rashta's previous child as well. Now that it all has become public knowledge, Sovashu just tosses Rashta in front of a trial that sentences her to death, and both her children are put into slavery for her crimes. I am not a fan of this children become slaves for the crimes of their parent system. Already iffy about slavery systems in general, which tend to be a common trope in these historical stories, but this one is messed up. And the fact that Navye never voiced or thought anything against it made me like her less. I know, modern eyes and all, but still, the author could have at least made the character we are supposed to love less complacent with the whole slavery system that has children be born into it and never get out just because someone earlier in their family tree did something wrong at some point. Anyway, Rashta is locked in a dark room. No windows, no light, just an uncomfortable bed, and given a single pill. She knows what this pill will do. It is to kill her. She is basically told, take this pill and end your life, or stay here and slowly starve and dehydrate to death. Yeah, quite messed up. While Rashta is reminiscing on her life over multiple sections of this story, you as the reader slowly learn the reasons why Rashta approached Sovashu and worked her way into becoming his mistress. She had a jealousy-tainted admiration and obsession for Navye. In her final moments, she fantasizes about living a happy life as sister wives with Navye. So now, Sovashu has chased away Navye, who he claims to still love. His lover Rashta is dead, and the child he was planning on raising with Navye is not his. Add to that he realizes he was wrong about assuming Navye was infertile all this time, he starts to spiral. The final push comes from a small note left to him, telling him the child was his all along. The paternity test has been messed with. Sovashu breaks. He starts to hallucinate while spiraling down hard and ends up jumping down multiple stories from a balcony, chasing the illusion of a happy younger Navye calling out to him. From this point on, Sovashu has a split personality. By day he has reverted to the younger him from before his coronation, that's still happily in love with Navye and thinks she is too. At night he is his current self, not spiraling but cold and emotionally dead. His daytime self and his nighttime self try to act against each other, Meanwhile, his retainers are under a lot of strain. But they cannot replace him, as there is no one to take over the Emperor's throne. Now after this, there's still a lot of drama for Navier to go through, including with her children and the other countries, but I will not tell all of that for two reasons. One, it'll end up making this video multiple hours long, but two, telling you everything will take away from reading it yourselves. My overall opinion on this story and the trashta term. As I voiced earlier, I find that the story itself ends up feeling dragged on and on and on. It is an interesting read for sure, but you have to keep in mind none of these characters are really good people, not even our main character Navier. Though, considering the community, one might say Rashta is more of a main character. The reason why she is the main character more is because her character has sparked a lot of debate in the community. I myself have not been participating in the debate as much, but I have been observing. On one hand, you have those who will just hate on Rashta. They'll use the trashta term everywhere and will refuse to budge from this opinion. The other side, however, insists you need to take every perspective in account, and they are also more focused on that slavery system that people in the story treat as if it's just normal as drinking water. I personally think both sides have their points. I have noticed the discrepancies in how slavery is treated, and even to a point that certain characters temporarily ending up in slavery is being portrayed as horrible, while for others it's shown as normal. However, I also agree Rashta is a horrible person for the things she did and how or why. While she didn't deserve to be a slave for the crimes of her parents, that didn't give her the right to seduce an emperor and harass the empress. Aside from that uncomfortable bit and the dragging of the story, I do recommend you give this one a read for as long as you're able to enjoy it. Though the moment you notice you're starting to force yourself to keep on reading, you better stop and avoid burning out on it. Overall, these are the scores I give this webtoon manhwa. Character development 3. The characters are quite interesting, but I don't see a lot of development in some of them, while others change a bit too drastically. Story, early on I'd rated a 4, later on it devolves into a 1, so I'll go for a 2.5. Immersiveness, despite my gripes with the story and how it feels dragged on, the overall immersiveness is quite well, especially with the relatively solid world building, so it gets a solid 4. Ending. Well, I've not reached the ending. I stopped reading around chapter 246, I think, so this will not get a reading. Trope. This story has quite a list of tropes, which in my opinion all have been added in quite naturally. So on tropes, this story scores a whopping 5. Art. Now, I'm not an art snob. Neither will I ever claim to be able to draw these stories better, but the style used for this manhwa webtoon I will sum up in one word. Pointy. Pointy chins, pointy noses. Quite a unique style. However, despite the bits of creative freedom here and there, the anatomy is quite done well and colors have been chosen to complement each other. Overall rating, I'd say it's not the worst story, just a bit of a disappointment. Now I think it's about time I finish rambling about Navier, Suvashu and Rashta. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Take care.